Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone had a great long weekend. We'll just give it another minute or so here. A few new people are logging in. If you're hearing us okay, just let us know in the chat box there on your right-hand side. Give a hello or good morning. Wonderful. Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Got a good representation across the country here. That's awesome. We'll just give it one more minute there. Let a few more people join us before we get rolling this morning.
All right.
Okay. Maybe we'll get started here just with kind of the intro stuff, and we have a quick poll to do, so that might take a minute there. So we'll just get rolling here. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jackie Pritchard. I'm a health promotion specialist from CFB Borden, and beside me, co-facilitating with me today is Nat Smith. He is another specialist in Borden as well. A few more years on the job than me, but together I hope we can give you a decent presentation today. Right off the hop, I'm just going to be pretty honest. We'll probably be, I'd say, probably closer to about 45 minutes or so today. I always say that's about famous last words because there might be some questions that come up, and we might get going on some tangents there. But in terms of content, we'll probably be a little bit shy of the hour today. So just letting everyone know right off the hop there what to kind of expect as we go. A few things. I'm sure those of you who have participated in these types of webinars before have seen this many times, but just a few pieces before we get started there. The information that you are seeing today is property of D&D, so any reproduction or retransmission has been forbidden. Some of the topics that we are going to be discussing on these webinars, this one not so much, but may not be appropriate for children. So using your best discretion if they are in the room with you right now. We encourage lots of questions and discussion, but just be mindful that the webinar is being recorded, and we're hopeful that in the next little while they will be posted up on CAF Connection there. So please feel free to participate, ask questions. If you want us to unmute for you to kind of have a bit more of a discussion, just let us know. But just being mindful that it is being recorded and hopefully will be shared in the coming few days there. If no one has any questions about that, I'm going to push a poll right now. This just basically gives us a indication of kind of who's joining us today. So just what affiliation are you with the CAF community there, either serving member, veteran, family member, civilian employee, or other. Helps us with our tracking and kind of helps us tailor some of the messages that we might be discussing throughout the presentation today. Let's give everyone another few seconds there to answer that question for us. Don't quite have everyone, but a few more trickling in there. Awesome. So definitely lots of serving members and D&D or CFMWS employees. That's wonderful. Great to have you on with us today. All right. I'm going to flip back to the chat there. So as you probably saw from the title today, we're going to be discussing some tips for healthy eating and meal planning and grocery shopping. So this is the 5th of our 6-part series of our Mission Nutrition program. So we're kind of nearing the end there, but still some great info and some kind of tips and tricks that we can kind of share with you to kind of help maintain or achieve those goals and maintain some healthy eating during this kind of uncertain time. So we'll kind of go through a bit of an intro, a little bit of a review of some of the content that we've discussed in the past 4 weeks. And then Nat will kind of take us through some tips for healthy eating and meal planning. And then I'll go through some tips for grocery shopping, and then share a few apps or websites that I find can be pretty helpful. And it's always great to learn a little bit more about the options that are out there to hopefully make your lives a little bit easier. So if no one has any questions, I think, Nat, you're up there, and I'll turn things over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. So good morning again, everyone. Nat from Borden. One of the specialists here as well for a few years. So today, as Jackie mentioned, we're going to be going over in detail meal planning and grocery shopping. But we thought we'd kind of start with a little review to see where that fits in kind of in the overall picture. So that's where we're heading. So with regards to our review, the first thing you can see on here, right foods in the right amounts. So that is more or less your definition to healthy eating. With regards to the right amounts, that is what differs from person to person. And that'll depend on size, on sex, on activity level. So with regards to size, somebody that's bigger needs a little bit more food in, energy in. With regards to sex, males need a little bit more primarily than females. And finally, with regards to activity, the more active somebody is, of course, the more energy they need to match that activity level. I find quite often when dealing with active individuals, chances are they're not eating enough to match that activity level. Last but not least, with regards to the right amounts, what we haven't touched base, at least so far this morning, we have on the course is goals with regards to weight. So if someone is looking to lose weight, you're looking at creating a deficit from your calories in versus your calories out. Again, if you were tuned in for the earlier sessions, we always encourage a small enough deficit. If somebody looks at getting that large deficit, okay, great, I'm going to lose all kinds of weight real fast. If I cut down my food to hardly anything, again, you're going to see that's not sustainable. So again, a small deficit, 250 to 500 calories is probably the maximum that we tend to encourage with regards to that deficit. On the other hand, if somebody's looking to gain weight, it's obviously the opposite. You're looking at getting a surplus in the calories in versus the calories out. Again, for adults to gain healthy weight, we're talking about muscle here. It's a little bit more challenging. But again, we encourage that surplus of quality foods. Anywhere from 500 to 1,000 calories for those looking to gain weight. Again, specifically looking at muscle mass. So that's a little bit on right amounts. On the other hand, or the other side, we've got the right foods. So we all more or less need the right foods, and we get it from all kinds of different methods, and that's an individual choice. But that brings us to the next point here on nutrient balance. So again, the right foods, you can break down to 6 different classes of nutrients. And then we are looking to get the right balance in that, in those classes. So the first class that we'll discuss are carbohydrates. We should be aiming for 45 to 65% of our intake coming from carbohydrate sources. The more active somebody is, the higher that percentage tends to be. Again, why? Carbohydrates are our number one source of fuel. We're 3 times more efficient breaking down carbohydrates and utilizing it as energy than we are our other energy sources. Regardless of what activity you're doing, chances are, I should say chances are, you are using carbohydrates throughout that activity. The higher the intensity, the more percentage or the more use of carbohydrates you're using. If it is a slower intensity, long duration, your aerobic activities, we then look at conserving some of our carbs and utilizing fat as our primary source of fuel during those activities. Where do we get our carbs? Whole grains, vegetables, fruits is where we should be aiming to get our carbohydrate sources from. Of course, we get a little bit of carbs here, there, and everywhere, but we should be looking at getting them from whole grains and our vegetables and fruits. What do we do when we get them? We store them in our muscles, a little bit in our blood, and a little bit in our liver. We don't like to share. So once we store carbohydrates in our biceps, for example, if we're doing bicep curls all day long, we're not going to replenish those stores until we eat and refuel through the fuel that we're consuming or the food that we get in. So a few things to think about there. So that's a little bit on carbohydrates. Protein is the next nutrient that we need the right balance. We should, again, on most cases, 10 to 20% of our intake should come from protein sources. We tend to use this for growth and repair with regards to anything and everything that we do. With regards to physical activity, the goal is to break down muscle during that activity, feed it with some lean protein afterwards in order for it to repair and perhaps grow a little bit bigger and stronger. Any excess with regards to protein intake, we either burn it off as fuel or same as we do with carbohydrate, store it as fat. So again, with regards to muscle mass and protein, it's part of the equation, but it's not the only thing. It's not the more the merrier. We can only use a certain amount for growth and repair. The rest we either use for energy or we convert it and store it as fat. Most tend to get plenty of protein intake from their diets. So again, with regards to protein supplements, apart from it being convenient at times, we get plenty of protein from our intake. So again, most do not need to consider supplementation in that area. Fats is our third macronutrient. And again, this will make up the rest of our energy intake, which should be between 20 and 35% of our diet. We use fats for a few different functions. Energy adds taste to our food, and it helps with a few specific things such as fat-soluble vitamins and different things along those lines. We tend to get fat a little bit, again, here, there, and everywhere in our diet as well. We find it in foods already. We add it quite often, either during cooking when we use oils or different things along those lines, or we add it at the table quite often with sauces and different things like that. But of course, we need fat in our diet. Vitamins and minerals are nutrient sources 4 and 5. We need those in trace amounts. With a balanced diet, we tend to get what we need with regards to our vitamins and minerals. There are some situations where people may benefit from a supplement. However, I encourage you to have that discussion with your registered dietitian or your doctor. Finally, the sixth class of nutrient tends to be forgotten quite often is, of course, water. We need 2+ liters per day is what we're recommended to aim for. And why the plus, the more active you are, the more you lose through sweat. And of course, the more you need to replenish. You can count everything: water, soups, juices, coffees, teas, everything except for alcohol. I tend not to be too popular when mentioning that, but we can count everything except for alcohol. So that's a little bit on nutrients. Where do nutrients fit in? Of course, we don't typically pick our foods around nutrients, but it fits in with regards to Canada's food guide, and that's how we typically aim for our foods. If you think about dinner last night, chances are you had a vegetable and or fruit, you had a protein source, and you had a grain. So again, that's how we tend to pick our foods, is from Canada's food guide. Helps us get the right balance. If we're following Canada's food guide, we tend to get that right balance that we just discussed with regards to the nutrients we need. So Canada's food guide is broken down into three kind of categories now, three different groups. Vegetables and fruits, we're encouraged to eat plenty of it. And when breaking down a meal, it should be half of our plate. The other quarter of our plate should be of whole grain foods. So again, with regards to our grains, we are encouraged to consume more whole grains now than before. And finally, the last quarter of our plate is our protein foods. So again, with regards to the old version of Canada's food guide, it combined two of the food groups, your milk and alternatives and your meat and alternatives, to make protein foods. And that should be our last quarter of our plate. So again, with regards to Canada's food guide, it helps us get the right nutrient balance. Last but not least, you can see on here, we've got label reading. And that could be another tool that you can use to help get the right nutrients. you can compare products, you can look at the ingredients, and you can make sure that you're getting the nutrients that you want and you're reducing the nutrients that you don't want. With looking at the label, and we're going to get to tips and tricks on cooking here shortly, and it's pretty much the same items. You tend to be looking at reducing your fats, your salt, and your simple sugars. When comparing different products between themselves, first thing you need to look at is the serving and or the amount. Right now, manufacturers don't have to utilize certain guidelines around serving or amount. So we have to be able to make the calculation in order to make them comparable when looking at two different products. So something to think about and consider. Come 2022, labels are changing slightly, and manufacturers will have to follow certain serving sizes or amounts so that it is easier for us to utilize. So think about those. Very good. So let's move on and talk about a little bit about barriers. So with regards to barriers, barriers are all over the place for whatever goals we all have. And what's important with regards to barriers is finding the right motivation so that we can overcome them. I'm going to put up a poll here, and then we'll move on and talk about barriers. You'll see with regards to this poll, I'd like you to identify what your biggest barrier is. I'll give you a few seconds to fill that out. Maybe some of you or most of you have overcome quite a few of these barriers, but at one point or another, perhaps still now, they still exist. Good. So here we can see, I think you can see these as well. I think I shared it with you. 39% with regards to time. With regards to cost, we're looking at 20-ish%. Fast food is simply too good to give up at times. Again, maybe convenience, that's what we're going to talk about. You're looking at 11%. And then all of the above, about a quarter of you have identified that. Perfect. So again, barriers, many different barriers for any goals that we all have. These here are some specific barriers that have been identified that relate to healthy eating. With regards to time, actually with regards to all of them, we're going to talk about some different things to help with all three here shortly. But with regards to time, a quick little tip, prepare big and in advance. It'll help you not have to think about things last minute, and it'd already be prepared. With regards to cost, again, same thing. Planning will help reduce costs, and I always identify it this way. If we are not willing to invest in ourselves, really, who is going to do that? So something to think about with regards to cost. So again, our health, our performance is important, so we should be able to look at that important factor. And finally, last but not least, convenience. So if you are typically, we'll put it this way, typically out and about, running around with kids, participating in sports, constantly on the go, convenience can be challenging. So again, planning and prepping will help, and we'll get to a few tips and tricks in a few seconds. But again, with regards to barriers, important to recognize where your barriers kind of lie and what you can do to overcome those obstacles or those barriers. Again, finding the right motivation and a little bit of time and effort up front, I kind of always put it this way, will lead you to eliminate these barriers that seem to be difficult right now. So where does it all fit in, right? Does healthy eating just happen on its own? And it absolutely doesn't. If we were simply to get up and hope that we're just going to eat well there today, chances are it is not going to work out the way we envision it, right? So it does take a little bit of work. It's a process. And here we can break it down a little bit. So what happens prior to healthy eating? Of course, we have to prepare it well. In order to prepare it well with regards to cooking, we have to have the right foods in house. And finally, so that is where grocery planning and shopping fits in. And right before that, what are we going to do? Again, we've got to plan it out. If this doesn't happen, again, healthy eating, chances are it is going to be a challenge, and it's more than likely not going to be the easiest for some. And again, how I mentioned, a little bit of work up front, kind of probably over a few weeks, if not probably a little bit longer. The first few steps will become routine, and it does not become such a challenge. Meal planning is routine. You tend to know what to aim for and what to get. And then cooking, again, after a little bit of practice, becomes second nature on what healthier options to grab or what to do to eliminate certain nutrients to make it healthier. So we'll look at this in a little bit of detail. Starting off, we're going to look at some tips for healthier eating. First off, looking at heart health. So again, you can see 4 tips here. The first, include veggies, fruits, fiber, and whole grains. What are we really looking at here? Canada's food guide, right? They're encouraging you to follow and aim for Canada's food guide. With regards to vegetables and fruits, again, typically nutrient dense. We get a lot of vitamins, minerals from our vegetables. With regards to vegetables specifically, it can keep us a little bit more full than fruits with the fiber content in there. And then same thing with whole grains. Again, important to focus more towards our whole grains to keep us full a little bit longer and provide us with a little bit more nutrients. The next 2 points here, limit your saturated and trans fats. Of course, we need our healthy fats and our healthy oils. But one area we can all look at probably improving a little bit is in this area, saturated and trans fats. And same thing on the other side there with salt and sugar. So these are different things that the label can help us with, and also the tips and tricks that we're going to be talking about here shortly that focus on these areas quite often. Again, these tend to be the nutrients that are high in our diets that we can look at cutting back and reducing and getting those health benefits. The last point on there, portions. So it's been identified that should we eat smaller amounts more often, that there are quite a few benefits to it. If you think about energy levels, if we eat smaller amounts more often, our energy levels stay more consistent with regards to performance and anything, sugar level as well, etc. How I like to put it is snacking can be very beneficial. So if, again, you don't want to eat smaller meals throughout the day, you still want your 3 meals, snacking can be very beneficial. Key thing with snacking is planning for it, making sure you've got your healthy snacks that will tide you over until your next meal. If we flip the script a little bit, I always like people thinking about it this way. What happens when we don't get that snack in from meal to meal? Chances are we start craving foods, and by the time we get home or we get the chance to eat, are we having that healthy meal that we had planned to prep? Probably not. We're grabbing the first thing that we can get our hands on, and they tend to be easily accessible foods that tend to not be the best for us. Again, we're not craving for vegetables and fruits. We're craving for sweets and sugars. So something to think about with regards to snacking and the benefits around that. So when you see some of our tips later on, important to have healthy snacks available so that when those times happen, you're grabbing those versus some of the unhealthy choices that we tend to aim for around that time. So that's a little bit on heart healthy tips. Let's look at, what do we got here? Healthy cooking tips. Every time I move, it blocks half my screen. Now let's look at healthy cooking tips. And we'll start off with a poll here to see your thoughts and knowledge around healthy cooking tips. So identify which tip here is not the one to help with regards to health benefits. All right, a few might have jumped the gun there. Yeah. If I don't set it up there, people are trying to get the most points in for the fastest response. Very good. So you can see here identifying the tip that is not the healthy one. Deep fry and adding lots of sugar or salt, right? So I thought I'd throw a little joke in there. But trimming fat from meat and removing the skin from poultry, it is a way to reduce the fat in that meal. Broil, bake, grill, roast, steam are healthier methods of cooking instead of deep frying and searing and different things along those lines. And then to add flavor, use herbs, spices, and lemon juice. So of course, instead of adding oils, instead of adding butter, you can look at different things as herbs, spices, etc. And of course, here are a few more tips. So again, before adding ingredients, you can drain excess fat from whatever you're cooking. You can reduce or eliminate oils in marinades. If you add lots of vegetables to soup, stews, casseroles, again, you're eliminating some of the other items that you tend to place in there, such as meats, etc. We talked about that one. So aim for your healthier cooking methods. Refrigerate stews, soups, chilies, and meat. Remove the hardened fat before consuming again. So again, all kinds of different healthy cooking tips, and there's many others. Let's talk about meal planning a little bit. So let's start off again with another poll. So this one here is looking at for you to identify the meal planning tips. All right, perfect. So again, here a little bit of a trick question. They're all right. So again, of course, the best answer is all of the above. But cook big. Reason to cook big is, of course, to have more throughout the next few days or week, whatever you want to plan for. But again, it will perhaps save you time from prepping, from cooking, and planning all over again. So again, cook big, plan for 2-3 meals at a time. Don't do it alone. So again, another important part, you'll see it up on here. Don't do it alone. So include everybody that's involved in probably the household or who's along with you. If they're involved, chances are the buy-in will be there, and it will help you out too. Again, try to make it fun for the whole family. If you're trying to do it all on your own and satisfy everybody, again, you're going to look at perhaps a little bit more stress than needed. So try to include everybody. The first point on here, consider what, who, when, where. So if you are kind of out and about quite often throughout the week, typically, again, plan for that. Know when you need to have meals to go. Know if you're going to eat out on the run, where you're going to stop, how you're going to choose that healthier option. Again, quite often when we are in-house, I do this activity around, I call it the food court, and I've got menus for about 4 or 5 different restaurants, and I have people go choose a typical meal and then choose a healthy alternative. And people find it quite interesting and amusing to see the typical meal and the calorie content the fat content and the sodium content in those meals. And they also find it surprising on the difference from the healthier option that tend to be available. But again, if we're not looking for it, we're not going to find it. Chances are, if you simply show up and looking for something to eat, you're not going to be able to pick out the healthier options. Maybe not at first, but after a little bit of practice, you will. But again, it takes that little bit of interest to find out what to look for. So that's a little bit on consider the what, who, where, and when. Be well stocked. So again, when we talk about grocery shopping here shortly, important to be well stocked. If you have the ingredients, if you have the healthy snacks, you're going to choose those more often, and will help with the planning and the prepping, of course. Recipe watch, stick to Canada's food guide. So again, with regards to those two areas, important to focus on and know what you like. I've seen some different things. I think on the next slide is going to identify another few things to do around there. But again, if you find different things different recipes that the family likes, keep them on the fridge, keep them in a drawer, keep them on your computer. Kind of have that fallback plan. And then finally, stick to Canada's food guide. So again, half your plate being of vegetables, a quarter of your plate being that whole grain, and a quarter of your plate being that protein source. And your protein source or your protein foods is another area that we can all be making choices around the healthier options. So Canada's food guide is now recommending a little bit more plant-based protein sources, which is eliminating some of the saturated fats that we tend to find in our red meats. So something else to think about and to consider. Chances are you're going to cut back a little bit on your unhealthy fats when making a little bit more of those choices that Canada's food guide recommends. And last but not least, here's a little bit from Health Canada, a few other tips. So again, set time aside to make your plan. And again, like I mentioned, it's not just going to happen. So if you have a day, I know quite a few people, Sunday's their day, plan, shop, and then prep food for the week. It doesn't have to be exactly along those lines, but make a plan that works for you and take the time to make it work and happen. Eventually, that time will become routine, and it's no longer kind of that time set aside. It's just a regular routine for you. Set yourself up with all the information. So again, we kind of touched on that, to have those recipes nearby, etc. And another tip on here, post an empty grocery list. So again, if you've got an empty grocery list on the go, it's going to help you identify what you need when you need it versus going through the drawers right before you need to go. Chances are you're going to miss something at that time. And then when you get to that healthy recipe you had planned to do, you'll be missing that ingredient. So again, think about exactly these different tips on how to plan, meal plan, plan for your week ahead, and with regards to healthy cooking tips. I'll hand it over back to Jackie to talk about some grocery shopping.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. All right, so now that we kind of have a bit of a general idea of kind of what meal planning kind of looks like, and really putting the time and effort in to get that planning phase done, let's talk a little bit about what we actually should kind of keep in mind when we actually get to that grocery shopping stage, right? We probably have our menu kind of planned out, and now it's time to actually go to the grocery store. So let's review a few recommendations to kind of help us stay on track, and again, kind of maintain or achieve those goals we're hoping to achieve. And a lot of this stuff, again, we've kind of mentioned it or alluded to it, and it's really not rocket science. It's kind of just, again, putting that work in up front a little bit to kind of help ease the actual trip to the grocery store. So again, having that plan, basically using what we've just discussed, Canada's food guide, making sure that you've figured out exactly what you need is super imperative. And as Nat just kind of mentioned, doing a bit of an inventory of what you have in your pantry, right? Know what staples you use quite often, maybe always be topping those up when you do make a trip to the grocery store. Basically making sure that you have the ingredients that you need for the meals that you're hoping to make, and in the right quantities too, right? So if you are doubling or maybe tripling a recipe, obviously you're going to need more ingredients. So making sure that you build that into your plan as well. Using a list, obviously, basically transferring everything from those recipes that you've maybe picked out, and going through and figuring out exactly what you do need. More times than not, I usually have the spices or the oils and things like that I might need for a recipe, but there might be a few things that I still need to pick up, like the fresh produce or maybe some of the meats and things like that. But obviously putting those all down on paper or using an app on your phone, and we'll go through a few of those in a second here, will help you kind of stick to your plan there. And then the last part there, exactly that, is just kind of stick to it. So if you have your grocery list, we're going to talk in a second here about how the grocery store is not necessarily set up for you to stick to your grocery list, but do your best to try and just stay to that list. I know what's really helped me is organizing kind of my list by department. So I can kind of go through and I know all the things that I need to get from the fresh produce section, and then from the fish counter, and then all of those types of departments as you kind of work your way around. Being able to kind of stick to that and hopefully not get too distracted and deviate from my plan too much. When I was doing a little bit of research for this presentation, I found a few studies that actually stated that approximately 2/3 of what most people end up purchasing from the grocery store wasn't their intention when they walked into the grocery store. So generally speaking, you're picking up some of those extra things, or you might get enticed by something that's new and you want to try it out, or something might be on sale that you hadn't anticipated. And obviously there's a time and place, but sometimes it can kind of rack your bill up there and put some things back into your home that you might not want there, because they might not be those healthy snacks, or might be things that help kind of or could contribute to derailing your nutrition plan. So kind of being able to have that self-control to stick to that grocery list obviously can be challenging at times, but it does take a bit of practice, but will help you kind of in the long run there. I want to talk a little bit about grocery store layout, and I put on this slide there that there is a science to the floor plan, and it's not necessarily to help you make healthier choices. So I did a little bit of digging into kind of understanding what the grocery store layout is kind of meant to be, and I found a few kind of tips and tricks, so I'll share those with all of you right now, because there are a few kind of things to keep in mind, and some deliberate displays and things like that might not always be of our benefit when we're trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle and diet. So the first thing that you normally notice is you'll see the red arrow on there. You're normally walking into a grocery store and you're seeing fruits and veggies, right? It's usually very colorful, it's exciting. Intention is to basically make it exactly that, make people want to be there, spend more time there, peruse the aisles, really entice you, and basically kind of create that facade of look at how healthy we are, right? We have all of these really great produce options available to you. And that's great. Obviously, it's a big section in the grocery store, and we should be kind of filling up on a lot of those different things. A few tips that I did recognize: if you reach to kind of the back of the apple stand, or kind of reach to the back of where the veggies are, you'll tend to get the fresher vegetables, because they'll typically kind of put the ones that they want to get rid of at the front. So kind of reach for the back there. You might get some fresher produce. And if you live in a small town like I do, we only kind of get those shipments of fresh produce in once, maybe twice a week there. So I have actually just asked kind of people at the grocery store, when are you getting your shipment of this stuff in, to make sure that I'm able to go and stock up on days when the produce is pretty fresh. Another thing with produce too is obviously we're kind of coming into now our growing season, which is awesome, but we typically don't get a lot of local fresh produce throughout the winter time here in Canada. So honestly, if it's super expensive and you're noticing a lot of really pricey produce, head to that frozen veggie and fruit section. You're going to get just as great nutrient value from those frozen veggies and include those in your plate, and tends to save you a little bit of money as well. So kind of an option there. You'll kind of notice if we're kind of working our way around here, there's usually a deli. Sometimes the bakery is in also that kind of back corner as well. Obviously, again, that's kind of there to entice you, those really yummy smells, those baked goods, those breads. So tip here is don't go to the grocery store hungry. We've heard this one many, many times, as we tend to crave those kind of high sugar foods, those baked goods, something that's really going to be yummy. That would be kind of a tip there to make sure that you're not kind of enticed by that smell that really gets everyone. Renee, are you looking to ask a question there? Or you can't hear me? Can anyone else hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Okay. Renee, maybe just if you refresh your screen, hopefully it'll let you back in. And if that doesn't work, then just re-click that link that you joined at the beginning there. If she can't hear me, I guess she probably can't hear what I'm saying. Thanks. And you say type that, Nat, as I'm literally saying that. And if she can't hear it, then that's not going to be helpful. Awesome. Thanks, Nat. I'm just going to keep rolling here as we go. Another couple things to kind of keep in mind is at the grocery store, there's oftentimes those paid promotions. So your end cap displays, those are usually things that those companies have paid to have on display. It might be kind of a new thing for the season, or they might be launching a new item. So oftentimes we can kind of get enticed by those, or kind of want to give those things a try. And those typically will probably be things not on our grocery list. So just being mindful of those, that those are paid to be placed in certain spots. And it's not always a deal, or you might not always be saving on those items. You'll notice here on this kind of display, if you look, your meats, your poultry, your dairy, and your eggs, those are basically the farthest away from your entrance of the grocery store here, right? So there is a reason for that, and that's really because those are typically some of the staples that we do need, right? We usually need to pick up milk, eggs, bread, if that's kind of on the back wall there, or grab some different meats and things. And that's typically to get you to actually walk through the entire grocery store and pick up a few more things that you probably didn't need. So just be a little bit mindful of that. One tip that I found out in the grocery store that I shop at is if I know I just need to go in and grab a dozen eggs and a carton of milk, I'll actually walk down like the household goods aisle. So like where the garbage bags and the cleaning products and stuff are, because typically those aren't things that usually entice me to be purchased. So I can usually kind of be in and out a little bit quicker without maybe getting distracted by some of those yummy smelling things or different things that I don't necessarily need to be bringing back into my house. In those inner kind of aisles there, that's where, again, you're going to kind of find some of those essentials. So those canned goods, those things that you might need, like your oils and vinegars, things like that for just general cooking, your spices, general merchandise, those types of things. Basically, the biggest tip that we want to kind of recommend here is if you can kind of stick as much as you can to the perimeter of the grocery store, and then be very deliberate on what you kind of need from those inside aisles. Because again, there's going to be specific placements of things, different promotions, all kinds of things that don't necessarily need to be brought back to our houses in those center aisles there that most times aren't the healthiest of choices. So just being mindful of kind of what you're going into those center aisles for, and not to kind of get sucked in and do the whole maze back and forth the entire time and turn your grocery shopping trip into an expensive and longer trip than is necessary. One more thing I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, and this is kind of a cost-saving measure when it comes to kind of placement of items on shelves. Typically, most companies, again, are going to pay for that kind of mid-display, eye-level shelf to make sure that the popular products are getting out there, and they're going to continue selling them, and they're going to be the first thing that you see. Typically, there's going to kind of be, I don't want to call them like second tier, but maybe some of those less expensive products that are basically the same thing, just maybe a different brand or something that might not be as popular, either on the shelves higher or a little bit lower. So take a look kind of up and down from those kind of main bullseye kind of shelves, and see if there might be something that that you can find for some cost savings. I actually noticed I was buying coconut milk once, and it was literally like 2 shelves higher, and it was like $4 cheaper. I couldn't believe it. I actually had to text someone about it because it blew my mind. I was kind of very shocked by that. And then also too, oftentimes promotions for products that might be enticing to kids are on lower shelves. So if you do have the kids with you, those different cereals or those candy kind of things that are really kind of popular that might be on commercials, they'll typically be on lower shelves, and sometimes we'll get snuck into the cart there because they're within hand's reach too. So just being mindful of that as well. And then obviously kind of just finishing things off here. I know it's kind of a hard time right now of a lot of people are doing a lot larger grocery shopping trips because we're not supposed to be kind of going out as often, which can be a bit of a challenge too. But purposefully try and make sure that you're getting those frozen items at the end of your shopping trip there. Just kind of the public health side of me coming out to make sure that your foods are staying to the right temperatures that they need to be kept at, and refrigerating as soon as you possibly can when you get home. Doing those washes, whatever you might need to do there. So I know it's been a bit of a challenging time lately for doing those bigger purchases, and they have been a bit more challenging, but if you can kind of put that planning into place, you'll hopefully be a little bit ahead of the game there. Before we move forward, I forgot I was going to do a poll here. I'm going to push this one out here. This one was just be related to the stat that I did share earlier about 2/3 of us buying things that we don't necessarily need when we get to the grocery store, right? So when you do go to the grocery store, how many non-essential purchases are you making, even with the grocery list, right? So never not once, on occasion, I was probably pretty hungry, probably most of the time, or every dang time I'm buying things that I don't necessarily need. So as the answers are rolling in here, we're pretty consistent with those statistics, right? So it just kind of goes to show, even kind of with the best laid plans there, we can kind of slip up and purchase a few things that we might not necessarily need. And again, as I said, there's a time and a place. If there's different meats on sale that you might not have been aware of, it might be a good opportunity to stock up for future meals. Awesome. All right, I wanted to just share with all of you kind of quickly here for the last little bit, just a couple different meal planning and grocery shopping apps or websites. So, excuse me, there's a couple that I'll run through, and I wanted to do a quick kind of demo of one of them that we reference quite often and can be helpful. I find it particularly helpful just for kind of finding recipes and some inspiration. Oftentimes I can get stuck in some cooking ruts, I find. So even if I'm not fully using it to the full capability of its menu planner features, it is helpful for kind of just getting a little bit of inspiration for new ideas. So the first one is unlockfood.ca. So this is the one we'll explore in just a quick second here. So this is brought to you by Dietitians of Canada, and basically you can kind of go through, basically create a plan that suits your dietary preferences, your goals. It helps you kind of identify what your grocery list is going to look like. In general, this site has tons and tons of really great resources on it. I can't stress that enough. We'll go through and I'll kind of show you a few things there in a second. So I won't spend too much time on this one. We'll get to a few other ones before we return to this guy. This is an app that I was able to find. So it's called Mealime. It actually is really great, and it provides you a ton of different personalizable options for exactly how you want to eat. So I found that's kind of a common theme for most of these different apps. And this again is just kind of a quick sampling of a few of them. But you can kind of put in if you're vegetarian, if you're maybe allergic to dairy or trying to cut out different fatty foods, those types of things. If you're gluten-free, all those types of preferences or dietary restrictions, you can kind of put in and build your meal plan around that. This one I found particularly detailed when it came to putting in dietary preferences. And you can also kind of bulk cook as well. So it gives you the option to increase the number of servings that you want. This one I found helpful in the fact too that it gave you a lot of 30-minute meals. So things that could be cooked, prepared, put together with minimal effort in 30 minutes and are still relatively healthy for you and your family. So that one is an app versus a website there.
Jackie?
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat there. Can you identify which ones are free, which ones cost money?
Absolutely. So all of the ones I'm about to show you here are free. Unlockfood.ca is a completely free resource. So I'll pop back just as we're kind of going here. This one basically has everything that is on there is available to you free of charge. Mealime, I've found it has a really, really great kind of free option. Like you could basically do a ton of different features. There is a pro version available, and that's kind of a theme for a couple of these. I personally have not paid for any of the pro versions and find that they're still super user-friendly, super detailed, and still provide you with a ton of really great options. You might have an ad or two that pops up here and there, but not too bad. Same with Yumly. So this one is one that I've actually just explored a little bit recently. You can tell it's actually a picture of my my account there. But I found this one really detailed as well. Again, you can kind of put in your personal preferences, create your shopping list. And this one I did find really helpful in the sense that if you found a recipe that you wanted, I think it's at almost 85% of all the recipes that are on there provide you with kind of a step-by-step video demo of how to prepare each of those meals, which was I found kind of really cool for something that I might not have tried before, right? So it actually showed how to roll sushi, like how to do those types of preparations. So that was kind of cool for that site there as well. Cookspiration. So this is actually one that's kind of in partnership with unlockfood.ca. And we'll explore this one as we kind of go through the unlockfood.ca site. So again, put all your preferences in there. You can make kind of substitutions based on the meals that you like, you don't like, ingredients that you like cooking with, that you might have a lot of, that might be in season, those types of things. And then again, you can kind of export your grocery list. So we'll check that one out in a second here. And the last one I want to show for those of you who are CAF members, and you do have a dfit.ca account, there's a ton of really great resources on this site as well, and basically combining those fitness and nutrition goals. And there is actually a meal planning platform on this site as well. So taking into consideration some of the different activity levels, kind of what you're doing, where you're going to be eating. I personally haven't had a chance to dig into this one too much, but again, very similar to the ones that we've spoken to about where you can kind of export that grocery list to make your days a little bit easier when you do have to head to the grocery store there. So is DFIT an app or a website? It's actually a website. I'm not sure. I think it is compatible on your phone, but it's not necessarily an app that you would download from the App Store or Play Store. So you can check that one out online, I believe. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to share a different screen that I have up here. We'll pop over to this guy. And I just kind of wanted to show you kind of how you can kind of navigate this unlockfood.ca site a little bit better. I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit more. Hopefully that will let you guys see it a little bit better. All right, so this again is the unlockfood.ca website, and you'll see on here, this is kind of their menu planner section. So you can basically click on this menu planner option, and we'll click to this in just a quick second here. But I did just want to draw your attention to a few of the other options that are along the sides here. Basically, as I was saying, this website is chock full of amazing information and tips and tricks to kind of help you navigate this very difficult kind of food network that we live in now. But you can really click through, get sample meal plans for toddlers, for preschoolers, if you have potentially diabetes or things like that. And then you could also click through here, plan your own menu. It gives you a whole ton of resources on how to kind of make sure that you're planning appropriately, following Canada's food guide, etc. So I'm just going to click to this menu planner here, and this is actually going to export you to Cookspiration. .com there. So as I was mentioning, you can kind of notice here, you can kind of choose your goal based on kind of your preferences. So if I were to, for example, say, I don't know how well you might be able to see this here, but maybe if I were to say that I'm a vegetarian, I could click that box there, and I want smart eating for everyday meals. So I'm going to select those two. You can see here if you're nut-free, dairy-free, soy-free, budget-friendly, gluten-free, all these types of things, you can select them and kind of help build your meal plan based on those goals there. Active lifestyle, that's another one. Super simply, literally go to the next step here. It's a little bit slow, I apologize. And this is literally going to generate for you a whole week's worth of different recipes, and things that you can try out there. So it's broken down by the days of the week across the top here, and then every meal that you might eat across the day there. At the bottom here, you can add in additional recipes, and they have a whole snack section, so you can add in a bunch of healthy snacks if you wanted to. The one thing that I do kind of recommend with this site is it does give you kind of 7 different breakfasts, 7 different lunches, 7 different dinners. What we were just talking about is I would probably, and I've done this before, go through and kind of select maybe 2 or 3 lunches, 2 or 3 dinners, and then double those batches, right? So instead of having to go and buy a grocery list of 5 pages long, I only have to go and buy the ingredients for maybe 5 or 6 meals, and I can double those and be good to go. But very simply, if maybe you didn't like something, so this Mediterranean baguette here, you can click on it, you can kind of check it out, see what's in there. It gives you all the nutrition information along the side and the step-by-step instructions on exactly what you should be doing to prepare that meal. It gives you all the ingredients here, and we'll kind of show you how to make that grocery list in a quick second. But you can kind of close out of that. But say that you didn't really like that. Maybe that wasn't your jam, you wanted something else. You can literally swap, click that little arrow there. You can swap that out. I'm going to change this to not be entrees. And I'm going to search breakfast. And it's going to bring me up a whole different list of all kinds of different breakfast options that might be more appealing to me. So maybe I'm going to make the healthy overnight oats instead. If I wanted to view the recipe, I could check it out, or I could select the recipe, and you can see it just made that swap out there for that meal. So these are a ton of really great recipes. A lot of them, all of them are kind of vetted by a dietitian in Canada. So you can kind of guarantee that they're pretty healthy for you. They're going to get you the nutritional balance that we're kind of looking for there. Basically, I still have all of these different ingredients or all these different recipes in here. But as you kind of go through, you can kind of select, remove some if you want to. Step number 3 is viewing your shopping list. I'll pop this open. So this is basically going to open up all the different things that I might need. And what's really great about this too is you can kind of select all or deselect all and go through and click on the things that you do actually need. So say, I know I have milk, I know I have arugula, I'm running low on balsamic vinegar, I need to get that. I need bell peppers, I need to get broccoli, I need to get spinach, basically you can kind of just go through and select the things that you do necessarily need to pick up at the grocery store. Obviously, you go through and do that for all of your recipes. Step number 4 is basically going to compile that all together and give you a nice printable shopping list. Save my menu. And it's going to be a little bit slow just because that's how it goes. But then you can literally download that, print that out, save it to your phone, email it to yourself, and you're good to go when you get to the grocery store. So just another option that's available to you to kind of check out some really great ways to kind of stay on top of planning there. I'm going to pop back into the presentation here and just kind of look at wrapping things up here. So basically kind of our last little tip here, and we've talked about this the entire kind of way through, if we can put that little bit of work in up front, we can kind of make meals for the week a whole lot easier. We can make sure that we're sticking to those goals, making sure that we have those healthy options available that are easily accessible, and that we can turn to with relative ease. Getting the whole family involved too is a huge one. So maybe have each member of the family pick 1 or 2 meals every week that they get to select, and they can help prepare it. They can help do the grocery shopping, however that might look. But hopefully, again, this will help reduce some of those barriers that Nat was speaking to a little bit earlier. That's kind of wrapping things up. Next week is our last part of this 6-week series. So how stress and eating are really going to be related. And I think that's particularly of importance right about now. I know a lot of us have been turning to some snacks to get us through, and being home, the fridge is easily accessible, right? So I think it's Jessica and Braden will be kind of taking you through that presentation. I think that's the 2 who will be leading that. So be sure to check that presentation out. And again, some really great resources are available to you for getting some more information about nutrition. Unlockfood.ca and Canada's Food Guide are definitely the go-tos, and a ton of different resources for potentially dealing with some of the stress that comes along with COVID right now as well. I'm going to push 2 more polls into the poll section here just to kind of wrap things up. But if anyone does have any further questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat box, or let us know if you want to be unmuted. I will give you the link to the next webinar right now. Absolutely, I can do that. We'll keep this open for just a quick minute if anyone has any further questions. Otherwise, if you answered those 2 polls, appreciate your time joining us today and for your participation. And look at that, of course, it was an hour, even though we didn't think we would be. So appreciate everyone for joining in. I'll drop that link into the chat box, so just give me a quick second there, and we should be good to go. Thanks, everyone.
You've got the link there, right?
Yeah, I just got to dig for it a little bit. There's a long list of them on this platform there. 26th is the date. Here we go. Share, copy. There we go. So that'll be the link to the next session there. So you can get that, click on that and get registered and get the reminder. I think it's 24 hours and then 15 minutes before the session starts. So awesome. I'll give you just a quick second if anyone wants to grab that link before we close things off there. Awesome. All right.
It's share that link there on this.
Yeah, definitely.
I enjoyed it.
For sure. All right. Are you good to go, Nat?
Yep. If there's no
Awesome.
further questions there, I think
I don't-
we're good. Just
Yeah,
thank you.
didn't see any roll in there, so I see
Got
only a
that.
couple people online still. So,
You gave the link. Perfect.
yep. Awesome. All righty. Talk to you later.
Yep. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.